My name is Pav, and today I'm gonna talk about those basic exposure settings in your camera. Look at that little mini guitar. It's tiny. So you are the person who's got the digital camera, the DSLR or mirrorless, and you tried it in auto setting and you didn't get the results you expected. And you are ready to move on to the next step, but you don't understand the settings, you don't understand the buttons, and you don't understand anything about exposure. So in this video I'm going to talk to you about the three pillars of exposure, which are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. An automatic setting of your camera definitely takes away that freedom, creativity, and possibility to get the results you want. So to start shooting manually, you have to understand few very basic rules. Aperture is the opening inside of your lens. So changing the aperture setting opens or closes the opening, the hole inside of the lens. Wider it is open allows more light, but confusingly, a smaller f number is a wider opening. So wider opening, more light coming in, smaller opening, less light coming in. Shutter speed is basically the time in which the photo is being taken. So how quickly the camera actually exposes the sensor to the light to capture the image. A smaller setting, for example 1/10 of a second, allows more light into the camera, making the picture brighter, but introduces motion blur on your subject. So anyone moving, anything moving, is gonna blur. So the faster setting, like for example 1/500 of a second, allows less light in, taking the picture quicker, and it freezes the motion. Anyone running or moving or anything moving is gonna freeze in time. There's a one rule about the shutter speed. To shoot successfully sharp pictures handheld, you should never go slower on your shutter speed than focal length of your lens. So for example, I'm shooting with 50mm lens, you don't go slower than 1/50th of a second. And the last one, the ISO, is basically a setting of sensitivity of a sensor to light. So how sensitive the sensor is to available light. Small number like ISO 200 means you need a lot of light. Sensor is not very sensitive to light, but produces very smooth pictures. Higher number, like for example 1600 ISO, means the sensor is more sensitive to light, allows more light in a darker situation, but it introduces digital noise. Horrible, nasty digital noise. So in my photography I always decide from the aperture. Aperture is my first decisive point. So for example, do I want the background blurred or do I want everything from the front to back sharp? The aperture determines that. So wider opening, smaller f number, for example f1.4, will create very shallow depth of field. Only one tiny place on the photo is going to be sharp. Anything before that and behind that is going to be blurred. But if I want to shoot landscape, for example, and I want a rock in front of the lake sharp as well as the mountains in the back, I'm going to close the aperture to something like f22, tiny opening, and everything from the front to the back of the photo is going to be sharp. I've been shooting photos for a long time, and most of the time I get it right or very close to be right by just guessing. In this instance, I have decided to go 100 of a second and 1000 ISO at f1.4 aperture. I took this photo, looked at the back of the screen, and obviously it's too bright. I want to keep the background blurred, I want to keep the aperture of 1.4, so I do have to change the other two, the shutter speed and the ISO. So firstly, the shutter speed. If I increase the setting to reduce the amount of light gets to a sensor, i.e. taking the picture quicker, to 1/250th of a second, and change the ISO from the high number of 1000 to lower number of ISO 320, which basically makes the sensor less sensitive to light, I get this. This is how I shoot. I decide the aperture first, set ISO and shutter speed approximately what I think could be right, take the photo, quickly look at it, and adjust the shutter speed and ISO accordingly. And on occasion you might be shooting at the event when you don't have time to fiddle with the camera settings or analyze what's wrong with the exposure. On those occasions I would recommend shooting in RAW, not JPEG, and shooting all the photos slightly too dark, so you put the camera in certain setting and leave it there without changing it all the time. Fundamentally, if you underexposed and the pictures are always slightly darker than they should be, you can always adjust and save them in post. So quickly to summarize what I talked about, the shutter speed basically is the time in which the picture is being taken. Smaller number means more light, but most likely if your subject is moving, it's going to be blurred. Higher number means shorter time to expose the sensor to the light. It means less light, but the movement of your subject is going to be frozen. The aperture is the opening inside of your lens. Wider open allows more light. Smaller f number on your settings, wider the opening. Smaller the opening, higher f number allows less light, but everything throughout the frame from the front to the back is sharp. And the last one, the ISO. ISO is the setting for the sensitivity of the sensor to the light. Lower the number, sensor is less sensitive to light. Higher the number, more sensitive to light, but the noise comes up. I hope this video will help you to come off the auto setting and be more creative with your camera. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. How are you, mini guitar? What did you say? I think it keeps talking to me. Settings, settings, settings. Boring. Wouldn't it be amazing if you had a camera which changed the settings when you thought about them?